We've been seeing reports about a wave of mass killings in Syria against Christians and Alawite minorities. Entire families have been reportedly slaughtered. There's a lot of terrible footage out there confirming these killings, but I've decided against showing it to you because it's quite unsettling. And I know many of you prefer not to be haunted by those types of images. But let me show you. This here is the Russian military base in Syria where people have been fleeing for protection. I mean, look at all of these people that are fleeing to these Russian military bases. The situation is dire. It is not unexpected. Many said this is exactly what would happen when Assad is ousted. The US backed the current fanatical Al Qaeda regime, likely knowing this would happen, but did it anyway. Joining us now is someone who knows a lot about the Alawites, who they are, what is happening. Human rights attorney and prolific author Dan Kovalik is here. Dan has written several books, including his latest, The Case for Palestine, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care. He's also spoken to the UN about his time in the Donbass. Recently, he's been retained as legal counsel for the Alawites Association of the United States. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kim. It's great to be back. Thank you so much.
Let's first start off with who are the Alawites? Let's just kind of get some background information first.
Yeah, so Alawites are Muslims, but they practice, I would say, a bit of a more of a permissive faith than a lot of other Muslims. They drink alcohol, even use wine in their religious ceremonies. The women do not cover their heads. And so they are considered by these extremist groups that have taken over Syria, which is basically Al Qaeda. They're considered apostates, even worse than Christians who are infidels, right? It's one thing not to believe, and that's bad enough, but the Alawites are considered to be violating the Islamic faith. So they're seen as a particular enemy of this government. Actually, when the conflict between these groups and Assad was going on, these extremist groups, their slogan was Alawites to the grave, Christians to Beirut. So the idea was they would kill the Alawites and exile the Christians. It should be noted as well that Bashir al Assad and his father were both Alawites as well, though they surrounded themselves largely with Sunnis in the government, but still they were Alawites.
Are Alawites a branch of Shia or are they a branch of Sunni?
They are a branch of Shia.
Okay. Okay. Are Alawites found anywhere else in the Middle East, or is this just Syria?
They are, but I think they are. There's some in Turkey as well, Lebanon, but Syria I think has the largest grouping
Okay.
of Alawites, and they live in a number of places in Syria, but in particular in Homs and in the coastal region, which includes Latakia and Tartus, where the main killings are happening at the moment.
Wow. Now, why are they being targeted? I've seen some mixed reports about what about the Christians? Are the Christians being targeted as well? These are the reports we're
They are
hearing.
being
A lot of
targeted.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, Christians are being killed as well. Not in the same numbers, but they are. In fact, I've seen videos of Christians literally being crucified. Um, so yes, they are being persecuted as well. But the Alawites, since this HTS and Al Jilani took over, they have been the main targets of their ire, again, just as they were during the active conflict.
So when we hear these reports of 7,000 Christians, I'm kind of wondering if people are confused and if they're thinking Alawites are Christians.
No, they're not
So
Christians. No,
Right,
they're
because
Muslims.
Alawites are
Yeah.
Muslims, but then there's also Christians
Right.
in Syria. So I think I'm not sure. Maybe you can clarify. It seems to me that some of the reporting coming out, like social media, for example, is that they're grouping them all together. They're sort of in their minds thinking Alawites are Christians of Syria, but actually these are
No.
two separate groups. But the numbers, I'm wondering if they're being conflated, so that it's because I'm hearing various reports about the Christians. I've heard 7,000 Christians have been killed in Syria, but then I've heard only a few people who happen to be Christian were killed in Syria, and that the Alawites are actually the ones being targeted. Do you know who's being targeted and why? And of course, the acting president al-Jilani, who's changed his name. He's gone back to his I think al-Jilani was just his like war name, and now he's
It
gone
was
back
his
to
war
his,
name, yes, when he was heading up the Al Nusra front of Al Qaeda. I
and
still
so
call
now
him Al
he's
Jilani because, I still, he's still Al Qaeda, So, but
right,
yes,
right.
he went back to his
But now
original
he's,
name.
yeah, he's got a different name. So people are kind of, tricky confusion, right? So he's got a different name. Al-Shara, I believe, is what the president of Syria at this point, but it's al-Jilani. He's claiming that this is just revenge, that these are not sanctioned by the government in any way, that he has nothing to do with it, that his groups have nothing to do with it, that this is just angry people and this is what happens.
No, that is absolutely not true. In fact, his defense minister was photographed along with some of these militant groups that are carrying out the genocide. There is no question that this is being carried out by HTS forces. Now, it should be noted there's 26 factions of HTS, and there's even factions within factions, but certainly the folks carrying out these killings by and large are members of the HTS.
And why are they targeting Christians? Are they targeting Alawites? Like you said, their motto was ban the Christians, because to them Christians are just infidels. It's either convert or leave, right? Like get out of here if you're not going to convert. But then as you mentioned, the Muslim group, the Alawites, they're viewed as, the religion, God, and yet you've turned your back and become these apostates, and so that's why you have to die. Is it because of that? Or do you think that there is a revenge aspect for their support for Assad?
I'm sure that there is some aspect of it as revenge because Assad happened to be an Alawite, but it must be very much emphasized that the fact that people were Alawites didn't necessarily mean they supported Assad. I know many
Mhm.
Alawites who did not. Even I know Alawites who fought in Alawite militias that were on the side of Assad's forces, but they weren't fans of Assad. It's,
Mhm.
he was what they had. But it should be pointed out that those people who fought alongside the Syrian forces who were in like Alawite militias, they did understand that as bad as Assad might have been, they were fighting something much worse. And it's these groups that have now come to power that they knew would do exactly what they're doing now. I mean, whatever you say about Assad, I think he did a decent job protecting religious minorities like Alawites and Christians and Druze and
Yeah.
Shia. And, you know, the again, many Syrians, even if they didn't support Assad, they understood that there was a darker power that they were fighting against. And that's important to emphasize because, and I think your question is trying to get to this, um, the government, the de facto government of Syria, and a lot of Western outlets, and even the European Union, are trying to claim that what is happening is are clashes between HTS forces and pro-Assad forces, and that is not true. That is not true. There are some armed groups that are rising up that oppose the new government of HTS. Some of those may be former Syrian soldiers that are loyal to Assad, but others are not. And it needs to be pointed out that in any case, most of these killings, the lion's share of these killings, are massacres of unarmed civilians. As you said, these groups are going into the homes of Alawites, murdering whole families, shooting people on the streets that are unarmed. These are by and large not clashes.
So it's a cleansing campaign. You're saying that this is not really revenge. This isn't because they supported Assad. This is these groups believe that they're doing the right thing under their God, like that this is their command to go out there and kill these apostates.
Well, they certainly are committed to doing that. Yes. I mean, I'm a little loath to talk about them doing it because they believe that's what God wants them to do. I mean, a lot of people feel that these groups are the ones that are the apostates, that they aren't true Muslims.
Right,
They
right, but I mean,
represent
what I'm
this.
saying, their belief system is these are the apostates, and God commands us to do this XYZ thing, and that's why we're doing it. I mean, you think that's
Yes.
really their motivation, not just um, well, there's clashes, or they supported Assad, and so now they get executed. But that this is because of their religion specifically.
Yes, I believe that because that's what they're saying. I mean, they're
Okay.
filming themselves killing these people. They're openly talking about the fact they're killing them because they're Alawites. I saw a video. It's Ramadan, and some guy was handing out these gifts to people driving by. And then when people looked at him, it talked about the fact that they were going, that people could expect to be killed if they were Alawites. I saw one militant who said that they went to a town that was half Sunni and half Alawite. And now it's all Sunni because they killed all the Alawites. There's no doubt that that's what is happening, and this is not surprising because this is what they did between 2012 and 2020 when they were fighting Assad. They did the very same thing to Alawites and Christians and Shia. Um, yeah, again, none of this should be surprising at all.
um, you've been retained as the counsel of the Alawites Association of the United States. What are they needing you to do as their counsel? Are there a lot of Alawites here in the United States?
There are, I don't know the numbers, but there's a significant number. What they have asked me to do, they are really wanting. First of all these folks have family back in Syria. And first of all, they want someone who is not Alawite to kind of be the face of the movement because they're afraid that their families will be targeted if they're openly doing this. And the main thing they want is someone to push at the United Nations for emergencies protective measures to protect the Alawites. So I've written to both the Russian mission to the United Nations and the U.S. mission to the United Nations, asking them to raise this issue before the Security Council to ask for emergency measures to prevent what I believe and many believe to be an ongoing genocide against the Alawites. And under the Genocide Convention in 1948, the Security Council has the authority to do that.
So what could they really do? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's said. I mean, we've seen this with when it comes to Israel and Gaza, and things can be said, but then nothing really is done.
Well, that's correct. And obviously, that's always a fear that nothing will be done. But what can be done, what should be done, I believe, and have asked specifically in writing that UN peacekeepers be sent to protect the Alawites. I mean, I think that this situation demands that.
Mhm.
And time is of the essence. The
Yeah.
truth of the matter is, and right now, I mean, the problem is that the killings are mounting. The Alawites are living in fear. Many want to just leave the country. Others want to separate from the country, have their own Alawite state, but that is not the ideal situation. They have a right to live in Syria as Syrians. So I think they should be given protection
Yeah.
from these armed groups.
Now, what about these Western nations? Is the United States? I know the United States had a hand in the rise of Al Jilani, as much as which people should be all absolutely outraged about. That this was
Yes, they
a
should
guy who
be.
fought with Al Qaeda, killing American soldiers, and ISIS, beheading people, and then the U.S. Champions him getting into power and ousting Assad. But I don't know if the US has materially supported this current Syria government, if the US has given money or weapons or support in any way, but it seems like Germany has given some aid to the new government. I think there were some reports
France,
of that.
Turkey. Yeah. The EU, yes.
So the Western nations, what is their reasoning for supporting this type of government that has now come in and is massacring Alawites and Christians?
Well, I think ultimately the West wants to do what they've done in other countries like Libya, like Yugoslavia. They want to balkanize the country. They don't want a strong, independent Syria. And, we see what's happened as soon as this government took power. We see that while they have the wherewithal to go around and murder innocent civilians, they didn't take any steps to prevent Israel from taking over a lot of land. Um, in Syria, Israel's now within 15 to 30 kilometers of Damascus. They've done nothing to stop that. They've done nothing to stop Turkey from taking over land. In fact, Turkey went into the coastal regions over the weekend to back up the HTS forces that were killing um, the Alawites and the Christians. This HTS group is completely servile to Western interests. So, of course, that makes Western countries happy. But again, I think they are happy if ultimately Syria is carved up and balkanized, because
Mm,
then there won't be any, country left there to oppose Western interest. And in particular, they won't be able to oppose Israel's designs on a greater Israel or Israel's oppression of the Palestinians, because Syria was, again, whatever you say about the Assads, they were largely supportive of the Palestinian people, and
yeah.
they want to break that up. So, um, yeah, I think that's the interest, well, at least one of the interests being protected there.
I see a lot of pro-Israel supporters in particular on social media pointing out what they believe is to be hypocrisy. They're saying, look at all of these college campuses filled with all these protesters protesting the Syrian government's massacre of the Alawites and the Christians. And then they post pictures of empty, there, no protesters, and saying, why is it that people are not protesting for the Alawites? And the implication there is because people just hate Jews, and that's why they're just protesting against Jews. And that, there's the hypocrisy, and this is what shows it. But why do you think people are not? I don't know what kind of support the United States government is giving to Syria. I think obviously conversations like this showcase the fact that continuing to protest Israel actually does help these groups in these other countries, because a lot of this is Israel's design. I mean, a lot of what was the reason for the United States to be involved in the disruption of Syria to begin with? Why did we care to destabilize the place? I mean, what good was it for the United States? I mean, nothing. There's nothing there for us beneficially. It was for Israel. So it's just
Yes, it
another
was for
Israel
Israel,
project.
of course. Now there was this issue of a pipeline that they wanted to go through Syria. That I believe they wanted it to start in Qatar and go through Syria and into
Hmm.
the through the Mediterranean to Europe, I believe. And Assad instead agreed on a pipeline that was going to, I believe, originate in Russia and go through Syria. So that some of it was this route of the pipeline. But again, let's be clear: does that benefit the American people one way or another? No. I mean, first of all, none of this benefits the American people. Um, but yeah, there were some oil interests. There was the interest of supporting Israel. That's it. I mean, that's what they wanted, and they wanted to weaken Iran because Syria was an ally of Iran, and an ally with Iran in what is known as the resistance, which
Hmm.
was opposing Israel's occupation of the Palestinian lands. So all those were reasons the U.S. wanted to at least fatally weaken Syria and topple Assad. Um, but again, even with Jelani in power, I think their goal is still to keep it weak, because they never know what anyone's going to do. So they want to just
Yeah.
keep it weak. Again, none of that benefits us. No, it's nothing any of us should be supporting. But those
Yeah.
are the geopolitical interest. And you remember this statement, Kim, that goes back to General Wesley Clark in 2001, saying that there were plans to knock off 7 different countries. Syria was one of them, and then the big kahuna was going to be Iran. So Libya
which
was
they're gunning
another,
for now. I mean, they're
and they're
talking
gunning
ad
for now.
nauseum about it. Oh, geez.
So the plan is still in place. That plan,
Yeah.
and go back and look at that statement by Wesley Clark. That plan is still in place, that neocon plan, which also shows, by the way, how there is incredible continuity between American administrations, whether they're Republican or Democrat, whether
Yeah.
they're Trump or Obama. They
Right.
tend to do the same things internationally.
So if people are going to get out there and protest on behalf of the Alawites and the Christians in Syria, Americans, if we're going to get out there and protest, who are we? Like for me, it's very clear cut when it comes to Israel. Right? It's extremely clear
Right.
cut because our government is funding them, sending them 2,000-pound bombs, giving them tons of aid. I mean, so of course we're going to protest the United States government and their support of a genocide. But what would we be protesting if we went out on the streets today for the Alawites and the Christians in Syria? Would you think?
I think we would ask the U.S. to again support emergency measures to protect the Alawites, and
Okay.
certainly to withhold any support for this new government and not recognize this new government. It should not be recognized.
Yeah.
Um, and frankly, the U.S. should be, I think no government in Syria should be recognized till their elections. This government did not come to power through some popular revolution. A third of the HTS forces are foreign fighters who have no loyalty to Syria, right? This is a completely externally placed, you know, government. And I don't
Mhm.
think they should be recognized ever. I think they need to hold elections. I guess if they're elected, fine. If they're fair and free and fair elections, but Jelani's saying there won't be elections for at least 4 years, maybe five, and that's unacceptable. Again, especially
Yeah.
how they came to power.
Well, and you know that when 4 or
Um,
5 years
yeah.
passes, he's not going to have elections. If he's still in power, he's not gonna ever have elections.
Well, or they'll have elections over the corpses of the Alawites and Christians and Shia, and he'll think that he'll be able to win the elections because he's going to get rid of all the minority groups who may oppose him. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
awful thing, and that's why there needs to be a stance against him. I think even protest at the United Nations to support measures to protect the Alawites and Christians and Shia is
Yeah.
definitely in order. And there are some protests. Some Alawites have been protesting in front of the UN, and I think others should join them. Certainly.
Yeah. I wish that we would protest to, like a general it would be more of a general protest of, "This is what US foreign policy leads to." I mean, here we had Libya, the collapsing of Libya, and, an open slave market, and it's a terrible place. Iraq, I mean, all of these places, yes, there were these strong leaders that were there that don't fit into Western standards, but they kept the places together. There was definitely times they had to be brutal, but I mean, we're not here in the United States, we don't have, or even throughout the West, we don't have the threat of these groups wanting to rise up and create caliphates. I mean, we just don't have that in our on our soil. So we're not having to battle that. These leaders in the Middle East do have to battle that quite a lot. And so what we've seen time and time again is, yes, they're strong leaders that we don't really agree with. They're not fit to Western standards, but they keep the place together. And this is what
Well, it's
happens when they
true.
go.
Well, it's true. Well, and also it needs to be pointed out, and this deserves a long discussion. But if you read people like Chomsky or Michael Parente, guy named Jean Bricmont, who wrote a good book on humanitarian imperialism, you know, God knows what Syria might look like today if they had been allowed to develop unmolested by these groups that were brought in from the outside, right? I mean, Bashir al-Assad was actually trying to liberalize the country when this war
Hmm.
started. Gaddafi was trying to do the same in Libya. His son was working with the International Democratic Institute in Washington to create a constitution for Libya. Who knows where these countries would be now if the West didn't intervene to support jihadists to tear the places apart? And
Yeah.
that's what people need to think about.
Um, let's pivot just real quick to Russia, Ukraine. You know a lot about this conflict as well. Um, oh, by the way, before we move on to Russia, Ukraine, you were just in Syria. Uh,
Yes.
what is it like right now? Were you ever in Syria prior under Assad and now? And is there a
I,
big difference?
I was there twice under Assad, and now once. I was there about a month after the HTS took over, but before the genocide really started picking up. And I say picking up because even when I was there, there were atrocities being committed, particularly in Homs, Syria, where I have a lot of friends, against Alawites there. And there was a lot of persecution of Christians as well in the town of, for example, Malula. I visited. That was the third time I visited Malula. So I was there twice in 2021 under Assad, and once now after HTS took over. And I can tell you, it was like night and day. So first of all, Malula, if you don't know about it, is this incredible place. It's this, well, it was anyway. This is just beautiful storybook place. It still speaks Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ. There's almost nowhere else in the world where that's true. It has a large Christian community with these amazing historic churches there, which used to be a real tourist location. Well, and that was true when I was there in 2021. Um, Now it's a ghost town. About a quarter of the Christian families have left Malula. The churches were empty. There were no tourists. There were no cars on the road. It's a very depressing place.
Where did they go?
And most went to Lebanon. And I know at least one family that went to Lebanon. I would say most have gone there or to Europe if they can. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was really, as I said, like night and day. The people there felt not protected anymore and felt that the government was a threat to them, not, you know, their friend. And there had been some persecution of Christians even at the point I was there. But again, now that's really sped up. So um, the other thing is that Jelani fired about 1 million public employees when he came to power, again, largely on sectarian lines. So a lot of people are out of work. There were a lot of people were out of work anyway because of the sanctions, because of the war. Now it's even worse. And everyone I'm talking to is minimally struggling financially. But if they're Alawites or Christians, they're just living in panic. And many of the Shia had left as well, by the way, even before this genocide was happening. About 100 to 150,000 Shia had fled into Lebanon, which
Wow.
it has to be pointed out. Lebanon is a country of only 10 million people. They've taken in over 1.5 million Syrian refugees since the conflict began in 2011. I mean, that's a staggering amount of refugees.
Hmm.
So the whole region's been impacted by this. And by the way, before that, even Syria had taken in over 1 million Iraqi refugees from the U.S. invasion of Iraq. So you can see how the whole region has been decimated by these Western interventions. It's a complete disaster. But again, I think things have gotten a lot worse even since I was there. I mean, I'm certain, particularly on the coast. And I do think the figures you said are correct. I'm hearing something between 7 to 10,000 people killed over like
Jeez.
several days. Now, most are Alawites, but some are Christians as well. So it's a
Okay.
very dark time, very dark time. And again, whatever you say about Assad, when I was there in 2021, I think things were at least more peaceful. You did not have this wholesale murder of minority groups. Um, so it is, like the devil you know is worse than the devil you don't know, or whatever.
Well, except we knew this devil. I mean, that's the thing that's the worst about it is we knew this devil and we still helped them gain power.
Yeah, we were told for years this was the devil the U.S. was fighting, and it turned out, in fact, they were supporting them. And that's true. I urge everyone to read an article I go back to all the time by Seymour Hersh. He wrote it in 2007. It's called The Redirection. And he said that as early as 2005, then President George W. Bush had done a redirection from opposing Al Qaeda after 9/11 to supporting it,
Hmm.
to overthrow governments like the one in Syria. And it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And then when people say these things, like Tulsi Gabbard or whatever, they're considered to be heretics, but this is the truth. This is what has happened, and this is what is coming to being now in Syria. This is the fruits of U.S. and Western intervention.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's just briefly talk about Ukraine and Russia. The latest reports today was that that Zelensky had accepted a 30-day ceasefire and was willing to go forward with that. But then Russia came out and said, no, we're not accepting this because this is just going to allow you to regroup. This isn't a real ceasefire. Do you know what's gone on with that, or what do you think is the pressure on Zelensky is pretty fierce from the U.S. I mean,
Yes.
I knew that the U.S. would put pressure on Ukraine to come to a deal, but I didn't think it would go down like this. To be honest with you, this has been quite the spectacle to watch.
Well, I think two things are motivating Zelensky to come to the bargaining table. One is the withdrawal of U.S. support. The U.S. stopped sending military aid to Ukraine, which is huge. They need that to keep going. But also the fact is, even aside from that, Russia's been winning the war, and I just saw that the Kursk front line has fallen. That
Hmm.
Russia is, retaking Kursk. The truth is, Zelensky's now in a situation where he desperately needs a ceasefire because he's about to lose the war. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. And again, the withdrawal of U.S. support is only going to speed that up. But Russia is on the verge of winning, and that's why they don't want a ceasefire. They just want this to end by, you know, a total capitulation by Zelensky at this point. My guess is that is how the war will end at this point.
Dan Kovalik, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your insight, especially on Syria and just what is happening to the Alawites and the Christians. I mean, it is just beyond words, the footage that I've been seeing coming out of there, the people, and like you mentioned, unarmed children, women, men. It's really, really awful. And this is, I think, a warning call for, just all the people. Again, all these people that were right, that were, like you mentioned, Tulsi Gabbard, or many who have just been demonized and called apologists and siding with the other side. And really it's just been it's so obvious what was going to happen with when you put Al Qaeda into power. I mean, it was just so obvious that this would be the outcome. Same thing with Gaddafi in Libya, same thing with Iraq, same thing with everywhere. And yet we just keep chugging along. And really, it's because Israel, they've got an agenda, and we're doing whatever it is they want. It's incredible that they've been able to do this to our government. The subversion of our government has been absolutely astonishing to see this happening. And this is the type of stuff it's creating, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
It is, and there's that 2012 declassified document from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency where they say, this is 2012, that the goal of the groups that are being backed by the West in Syria is to set up a religious caliphate. So we knew it. Everyone knew it. There's also emails from Hillary Clinton to advisors that say the same thing. You can find them on WikiLeaks.
Yeah,
None of this was a secret. It's an open secret. But as you say, if you said it, you were vilified. And you know, at this point, though, it's cold comfort to say, "I told you so," but
right.
we told you so.
Dan, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it.
You've been watching a clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.